God, Bud, your voice is
All
starting to go
right.
bad again.
Here we go.
Okay,
Connections already. Yep. Connections
we
live.
ready?
Yep. We are on and going. Hopefully, some of the guys didn't give up on us during that last stream. We'll see. But today, for this first sit down, it's a little rough. We're going to do another one once we get everything situated. We've got Mr. Terry Cadden back with us today. He is a MACV SOG veteran. He was a member of the Hatchet Forces out of CCC Khartoum, and he was a part of a. Oh, good. We've got some men in here with us, Mr. Terry. Jason's here. He's a good guy. We've got Mr. Terry in here with us, and he's got a hell of a history. We're not going to go too long today, but we're going to let him get into it here right off the bat. Mr. Terry, why don't you go ahead and lay it out on us?
Well, my name's Terry Cadenbach, like Bud said. I went in the Army December of 66, went to jump school in January of 68, and two memorable things that happened at jump school. One is I shattered my right ankle and broke my back. And the other was John Wayne was filming the movie The Green Berets while we were there. And one day while we were out doing our 10-mile run after breakfast, they were filming one of the scenes that he was in, and they were going to have about 2 hours to set up the next scene. So he told our cadre that he wanted to visit with us. So they pulled us off the field, and we sat in the bleachers, and we all got to meet him and talk to him for 2 hours. And that was a rush. And they used us in the background in one of the scenes in the movie. So that was pretty memorable. Then when I got to Fort Bragg, we still didn't know that my ankle had been shattered. I was hobbling and everything, but let's see, that was the end of January. So the end of March, I was planning on flying home on payday weekend to get my car and bring it back. And they said, oh, well, you're scheduled for a jump on Saturday. And I did something to my ankle playing football after class on Wednesday night. So I went on sick call Thursday, and the doc says, well, you shattered your ankle, but it looks like it's healing on its own. So I'll just write you a note to get you out of the jump on Saturday. And I flew home, got my car. Fast forward through training and everything. Obviously, I was still having problems with my ankle. And August of 68, we were scheduled to graduate from training group. And we had heard about this lady in the Pentagon named Billy Alexander, who handled all assignments for Special Forces. So 11 of us got together, and we sent her a dozen roses along with a list of our names, and told her that we all wanted orders for Vietnam when we graduated. The big day comes, we graduate, they hand out orders, and all 11 of us got our orders for Vietnam. Well, during training, one night we were sitting around shooting the breeze with one of our instructors and asked him, what is this secret organization that nobody wants to talk about? And he's like, I ain't going to talk about it. I don't want to go to jail. And he says, when you get over there, you'll have an opportunity to find out what it is. So we get over there, and when we get to 5th Group headquarters, we spent a week filling sandbags, and that was to get us acclimated to the heat, which makes sense if you think about it. And it helped. And then we spent a week on this island called Hantre Island, just learning different operational things. Like I got picked to demonstrate the McGuire rig. So if the chopper couldn't land, they drop these ropes, actually nylon straps attached with a sandbag on the end through the trees, and you could get in and hook in, and then they could pull you out from on these 100-foot long strings. Um, only thing memorable that happened on that week, other than getting to do the McGuire rig, which was pretty cool, was I walked under this tree limb and there was this beautiful little green snake slithering along it. But he was up above me and I went under it. And the instructor says, "Do you know what you just did?" And it's like, "No." And that snake that was on that tree limb above you is a bamboo viper. If it bit you, there's nothing we can do for you. You're dead. So that kind of cemented my lack of interest in anything with no shoulders on it. So we go back to 5th Group headquarters, and the group sergeant major gets us all in a room, and he says, "I'm going to offer you this opportunity to volunteer for this super secret organization." He says, "I can't tell you anything about it because I don't have the clearance. But if you want to volunteer for it, raise your hand. I'll put you all in a separate room and you can fill out the paperwork." So we did that. Out of the 11 of us, 10 of us did that. And then we got shipped up to Da Nang, which at that time was called, CCN FOB. I think it was 4. I don't remember. 1, 4. There's so many numbers that I didn't really have anything to do with. But they get us in a room then, and they say, "Okay, you volunteered for this. You got one chance to back out of it," and nobody backed out. So then they dropped the map open and show us and start explaining to us that our job would be running missions across into Laos, Cambodia, or North Vietnam, depending on which of the FOBs we got assigned to. So we all signed the form saying that we wouldn't disclose anything for 20 years. And if we did, we'd get 20 years in Leavenworth prison and all that. So I got orders for, at that time, it was called CCN FOB 2, which was in October of 68. So they shipped me down to Khartoum. And when I processed in, when I went to the supply room to draw all my gear, the supply sergeant was a guy named Robert Howard. For those who don't know, Bob Howard, at that point in time, he had already been put in twice at DSC, and that's because of some political nonsense down in Saigon by Westmoreland. They didn't think Special Forces guys should get medals of honor. So anyway, I drew all my gear, and I can't say that Howard and I were friends. All I can say is I met him on more than one occasion, and he was the nicest, most down-to-earth guy you could imagine. Then they told me, they said, "Well, we're sending you up to the yard camp." And it's like, okay, what's the yard camp? Well, the yard camp was part of FOB 2 at Khartoum, but they didn't have physically enough room for everybody there. So about 3-4 miles down the road, they had what used to be a camp, and then it was something else, and then CCC took it over. And so we had Company B, and I had no idea what is Hatchet Force. So Hatchet Force was a company-sized element down at the FOB, at the main FOB. I know they had Company A. At the yard camp was Company B. I've read where people say there was a Company C. I never heard of a Company C. The only Company C I ever heard of was our security company at the yard camp. But anyway,
yes, sir.
So I get up to the yard camp and got welcomed in, and they got my room and all that, and then sat down and kind of had like a meeting with the captain and the lieutenant. And the structure was 3 platoons. Each platoon was basically 32 men, which was 4 Americans, a platoon leader, 3 squad leaders, and you had the rest were 3 squads of the Montagnards. So you had 3 platoons, and as it was explained to me, our job would be numerous things. One could be if a recon team, let's say they found a truck park, which I'll get to in a minute when I got shot the first time. So a recon team finds a truck park and they just don't have the men, the numbers to handle doing something with it. So they call in the hatchet force. Maybe a recon team is in so much trouble that it's going to take more than a bright light team, which is usually a reinforced recon team. It's going to take more than that to help them out. So we might go in to help them out there. Then there was what was called SLAM missions, which they told me happened twice a year, but I think in a year I was on 3 of them. A SLAM stood for search, locate, annihilate, and monitor. And we changed monitor to be mutilate because we were all a bunch of heathens anyway. So it was search, locate, annihilate, mutilate. And if you knew what they did to some of our guys, you'd understand it, but I'm not going to go there out of respect for those guys.
Absolutely.
So my first mission, we went in, all the areas of operation had names on them, like it was a letter and a number, and on the maps of the whole area of Laos, you can see that broken down into these 6 by 6 kilometer squares. And I was told that we were going on a SLAM mission in Hotel 9. And then they kind of added, well, you know, Hotel 9 is one of those places nobody wants to go because it's a guarantee that you're going to get all shot up. And if you look on a map, the river that ran through this area, there was an area in the river called the Bra. And if you look from the air, it kind of has the curves in it to make it look like a bra. Hotel 9 was very close to that area, and a major branch of the Ho Chi Minh Trail crossed that river right there by Hotel 9. Well, you know, they call it the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So is it a highway? Is it a trail? Is it a path? It's all of the above, depending on which part of it you're on. There's areas where it's all cleared by a bulldozer. And yes, the North Vietnamese had bulldozers. Some of it is just vegetation strewn with bamboo on both sides. And sometimes they would bend the bamboo over in an arch and tie them. And that was to conceal their trucks from the air. So we got both companies, Company A and Company B. I'm up in the point element of course, Company B. And there were 7 of us in the point. There was Captain Ron Goulet, who's KIA, Lieutenant James Jerson, who was KIA eventually, myself, my interpreter, and 3 other of our Montagnards. And we come down off of this one mountain, and at the bottom there's a stream, so we fill our canteens. And then we got to go up the next hill, and there's stairs, literally stairs cut into the side of this mountain. Now, you don't just find stairs cut in the side of a mountain out in the jungle. So right there is be on alert, because this is something big that we're close to. So we get to the top, and on the map, and then there would be a big open area, and our goal was to get down, get across the open area, and get up on the high ground where we'd spend the night. And we couldn't see anything because of the triple canopy jungle. So I unbuckled my pistol belt and I said, why don't I take off my gear and I'll climb this tree and see if I can see out and see if we can see the open area. No sooner did I say that than all hell broke loose and a couple of rifle grenades came in, killed the 3 Montagnards in the very front. And I'll say what happened. We walked up on a trail and apparently there were some guards on the trail. Anyway, the rest of us then are pinned down with automatic weapons fire. My rucksack had bullets across the top of it, and I took a bullet in the flash hider of my rifle, so it was no good. And, you know, this is my first time in combat, and it's like, okay, just react, do what you got to do. So the guys still coming up the mountain, got close to the top, and they ended up with a grenade or a rifle grenade or whatever, and it wounded a bunch of them. So I took an M79 and a bandolier of ammo from one of the yards, went back up on top, told everybody to get their head down, and I started firing the M79 almost straight up, just enough of an angle to where it would come down about 30 or 40 feet away from us. And I did a few rounds like that, and that took care of the ambush. There was nobody left to shoot at us. So we spent the night. Bud's showing a book. I'm not really sure what he's showing, but
we was trying to get a map in there.
So we spent the night on the mountaintop. We could hear all night long on the road down below. We could hear trucks pulling up, tailgates dropping down, and voices. So we knew by morning we were going to be in deep doo-doo. So the decision was made to pull us out in the morning and get us out of there. So they dropped us a chainsaw, and we had to cut a bunch of bamboo and some trees to clear an LZ for the chopper, one chopper at a time. And we got pulled out. And so we had a number of wounded and the 3 yards who were killed in the very initial fire. And we got pulled out. So about a week later, Captain Goulet and Lieutenant Jerson came to me, and they got this big write-up, and they said, we're putting you in for a Silver Star. Now, I don't think any of us went over there. Well, I can't take – some people wanted to accumulate medals. Other people didn't give a hoot. I told them, I said, look, I didn't come over here to win a bunch of medals. I was just doing my job. I wanted to go home at night. I didn't want to be dead on the mountaintop. So I talked them out of putting me in for the Silver Star. Looking back on it, that was pretty stupid because it would have looked nice on my resume. Anyway, then I noticed yesterday when we were trying to set this up, somebody was wanting to hear about Leghorn. So I guess chronological, I'll talk about Leghorn next. Leghorn was a radio relay site about 10 miles inside of Laos. It was on a mountaintop that was only accessible by air. So you got to be flown in by choppers, flown out by choppers, although I've heard that a couple of recon teams walked down off the mountain, but I don't know how they got down because I spent a month up there, and I just don't see how you could get on or off of that mountain. Anyway, every month we would send a platoon of Montagnards and 2 Americans up there, and it was a radio relay site. And the whole purpose of it was that the teams on the ground, we were their link to the rest of the world. So a couple of times a day, they'd call us with their sit reps. If they got into trouble, we'd get a hold of the forward air controller, which we call Covey, and we'd get them air support and whatever help they needed. Pretty uneventful. I mean, there was a lot of action going on. And I guess this is a good point to point out some of the inadequacies in our training back in the States in training group. I never flew on a helicopter till my first time going into combat. I fired an M16 a few times on our range. We were never taught how to work airstrikes. And there's so many things that we weren't taught because they were in such a hurry to get warm bodies over there. So anyway, on the night of December 17th, 1968, after being told over and over, oh, it's never been attacked, Leghorn's never been attacked, all of a sudden there's this huge explosion and it blew the corner out of our ammo bunker, which was right next to the bunker that the other American and I shared, where we had the radio. Well, the coax cable came down the corner of that bunker and over into our bunker. The coax cable got severed in two by the explosion and that explosion exposed all the crates of ammo in the ammo bunker. But thank God it didn't set them off, or I wouldn't be here. So I'm scrambling around. The other American had, I'm assuming that he had malaria, because I didn't know the guy and I never saw him again after they medevaced him out the next day. But I'm looking around in the dark trying to find the little whip antenna that got attached to the PRC-25 radio that we used. And that antenna, it looked like today a tape measure, a metal tape measure. And it was, OD colored green, and it's screwed on the top where the antenna goes. So I finally found it, and I got on there and I'm calling, trying to raise somebody. And finally, one of my teammates, Alan Farrell, he had been assigned to the other radio relay site further north in Laos called Hickory. And he was able to hear me. And then he got a hold of 24 hours a day. There was a C-130 flying around over there, commanded by an Air Force general. And during the day, it was called Hillsborough, and at night it was called Moonbeam. So he was able to raise Moonbeam, and they got down over me. And this general had the power to just divert any and all aircraft anywhere in Southeast Asia to come to our assistance if we needed it. Well, at that time, other than the couple of explosions, we didn't need anything at that time. The next day, the FOB sent up a crew and they replaced our coax cable. They brought me a sniper rifle and some other goodies. And other than just your normal M16s, M60s, M79s, the only other thing we had that was pretty cool was a 57 millimeter recoilless rifle. And so starting the next day, we started taking incoming rounds from different mortars, I guess, and whatever. And across the valley on this one mountain, and this was not unusual, and I firmly believe that they had either a 12.7 or a 37 millimeter anti-aircraft gun. And I believe that it was in a cave and it was on rails so that they could wheel it in and out of the cave. So if we decided to work an airstrike on it, they're in the cave, we're not going to hurt them at all. So every time a chopper came anywhere near, that gun would come out and start lobbing anti-aircraft rounds at the chopper. And I was very fortunate because I had some really patient forward air controllers and pilots who taught me how to work airstrikes. And we started working airstrikes on all these different places where incoming rounds were coming from. Down, as I'm looking, it would be south. As I'm looking south, directly down in the valley was another crossing over that river. And at nighttime, we could see trucks with their lights blacked out and that going across that river. And then I'd call in like spooky gunship or some airstrikes on them. and try to blow a few up. And these guys really patiently taught me how to work airstrikes accurately. So one day there was about 100 NVA troops on this plateau down the hill from us. I don't know what they thought they were going to do, because I don't know how they could have possibly gotten up to us. But anyway, I called the forward air controller and I said, I got about 100 troops on this open plateau. They came out of the woods, and he said, hang on. And then he gets right back to me and he says, I got a pair of SPADs, which were the A1E, the old propeller-driven Korean War vintage airplanes that supported us. And he says, I got 2 of them coming back from a mission, and they got a full load of napalm. He said, fire around down there and let me know exactly where this plateau is. So we fired a white phosphorus round down there and marked it. And 2 A1Es fly over it with a full load of napalm.
Oh no. Did we lose?
My colors started degrading and everything. So, no more picture. Anyway, I spent the rest of the month, we spent taking fire every day, and end of story. So at the end of December, I got pulled off. It was my turn to go home and go back to camp. January comes. Well, guess what? Company B is going back into Hotel 9. And this is a story that's in Joe Parner's book that just came out called Khantum. So we're walking. Bud, that cigar is going to kill you, Bud. So they decided, we came down off the hill onto the trail. And at the bottom of the hill, it's the only time I've ever heard of any team running into punji stakes over in Laos. And to this day, I couldn't tell you why were they there, because, they'd run the risk of getting their own guys. Anyway, we start walking along the trail, and I see this, looks like a piece of cast iron or something. And I picked it up, and I went up and asked Captain Goulet, what is this? And he says, get the hell out of here with that thing. That's an unexploded CBU round. And so I gently went to the back of the line, and I tossed it underhand as far as I could. And when it hit the ground, it went off.
Oh.
So just like with the snakes, don't ever pick up anything. Don't pick the stuff up. You may end up dead. So anyway, we walked the road for a while, and that night we decided to block the road and try to prevent any truck traffic from coming down. And then we could maybe work some airstrikes on them and take out a bunch of trucks. Well, we got pounded pretty hard that night with everything they had. And we got pulled out the next day. So they pull us out, go back, we do our debriefing and all that. And there was a schedule of sorts, but we never knew what our next mission was until they called us for a briefing. And here, I'm so busy talking, I forgot a key thing. When we got pulled out of that mission, the chopper that I was in, we're flying by, and all of a sudden there's all these black puffs of smoke, and the door gunner says, anti-aircraft. I'm like, oh, Christ, now we're going to get shot down. Well, sure enough, we took a round in the engine or transmission of the chopper. So keep in mind, we're sitting on that solid aluminum floor of a Huey, our legs hanging over the side, and we're shooting at the bad guys down below. And this chopper all of a sudden gets shot down. The Hueys were designed to go into auto rotation, which is like a large spiral, instead of just dropping out of the sky. So our chopper goes in to auto rotation, and when it finally meets the ground, it's going forward at a downward angle, and it slams into the ground. So your hips and your back take all that impact. I didn't know it at the time, but I broke my back again twice. So that was the second time. And, I planted C4 on the chopper, and we went up in the air on the chase ship, picked us up, and we go up and we got to watch the gunships blow up that chopper. And that was pretty awesome, although you hate to see it because it, one less chopper we had. So then February, I don't remember what we did in February. I know we went out, but I don't remember.
Mr. Terry, I'm going to jump in and ask you something. But didn't you actually have a little bit in January of '69? Didn't you have a little bit of interaction with Franklin Miller and his Medal of Honor team, RT Vermont?
No, that was January.
Oh,
that was
okay.
A year later.
Okay.
And
I jumped ahead then. I'm sorry.
I missed it. I missed it, but in December 29th of '69, so I was almost done at Leghorn. One of my good buddies, Robert Sheridan, was on a recon mission, and his team got hit really hard. And Bob, the yard that was with him when it happened, said that he was dead. We sent a bright light team in. We sent a platoon in from our hatchet force because we knew they'd be waiting on us. Sent a platoon in, and they got ambushed right off the bat. And this is another thing that shows you how crazy Robert Howard was. He volunteered to go along as a what we call a strap hanger. And Lieutenant Gerson was shot in the very beginning in the ambush, and he was mortally wounded. And Bob Howard's weapon was blown up in one of the explosions, and he was wounded in 3 or 4 places anyway. So he crawled forward with all that going on, and he grabbed Lieutenant Gerson's body and pulled him back into the perimeter. And finally, after a multitude of airstrikes and a lot of injuries and casualties, they got him pulled out, including Lieutenant Gerson's body. And Jim was our XO, and we were all pretty tight as a group. It was that mission that Howard, for the third time, put in for the Medal of Honor, and he finally got it. And in the meantime, while you're waiting on something like the Medal of Honor, they put you somewhere where you're not going to get hurt. And they had him in supply, and he hated every minute of it. And every time he got a chance, he would, without permission, slip out on a mission with other teams. But thank God he finally got the Medal of Honor. And as everybody knows, he ended up being a colonel and in charge of training group, and he had a lot of different assignments, but he ended up as a full bird colonel when he retired. And that was a direct commission, battlefield commission is what we called it then. So anyway, February, I don't remember what we did. Come March. Yeah. So in March, we had taken a lot of casualties in January and February. So this was about early March. We decided to have a big party for our Montagnards. And I've got a lot of pictures from it. So we took a King Bee, which was one of the Vietnamese piloted H-34 helicopters from the Korean War. And one of our guys went out with them and they flew over the presidential estate, the president of South Vietnam's estate. And with an M60, they killed this animal. It looks like a water buffalo. It's called a gore. And they dropped down real quick, rigged up a sling, hooked it up, and brought it back to camp, to the yard camp. And the yards took care of butchering it and cooking it. And the entire thing, the head was set on display with the tongue hanging out. And that was very significant to the yards. And the whole gar was cooked as shish kebab. And we had rice wine like you wouldn't believe. And the colonel from down at the main FOB shows up because, you know, politically you need to invite him. And he's got this photographers with him. And one's got a big camera, the old black and white cameras, and the other had a movie camera. I get a copy of the black and white pictures. Well, about 10 years ago, I was watching the History Channel, and there was a series on called Special, Elite Forces of different countries around the world. So they had one on Vietnam, and it was about SOG. And the guy that was shooting the movie film, here's a movie of me drunk on my can, drinking rice wine. And I called my wife in there, and they showed different scenes twice on this program. It was an hour-long show. And here I am, drunk as a skunk, drinking rice wine. I've got the pictures that they sent me to go with it. So anyway, we get to the middle of March, and we had hired a bunch of new yards to replace all our casualties. So one night, I'm in my room, and I had a reel-to-reel tape recorder and a transistor radio, and I was recording music off of Armed Forces Vietnam radio, AFVN. And all of a sudden I hear thump, thump. Well, there's no mistake. It's a mortar. So I yelled incoming, and everybody scattered. This is how good the Vietnamese were. The first round landed directly over our poker table where guys were playing poker. The second round landed directly over the bar. The third round landed in the men's shower where the first sergeant was taking a shower. Fortunately, he didn't get injured. And then, and the Vietnamese sappers decided, and Jason Holmes, yes, I'll talk about that RPG. Anyway, they decided they were going to overrun our camp. And then adjacent to our camp was a group of engineers, had an asphalt plant, and they were maintaining the asphalt roads. Anyway, they were coming through the wire. They were hitting us hard, and it didn't go well for them. Let's just say in the morning, the engineers had to take a backhoe and dig a really large hole. And enough about that. So we went out on a sweep around the camp, and you know, there's some things we just don't need to talk about. But we went on a sweep around the camp, and some of the goodies that we found, I just donated to the 5th Group headquarters to their museum. And we found all kinds of bloody bandages. We found where they had chained people to trees. And we figured this was locals. They got them high on heroin because we found the foil packets. We found brand new counterfeit money, Vietnamese money, and all kinds of bloody bandages and all this stuff. And So we figured what they did was they snatched up a bunch of the locals and, got them high on heroin and chained them to the trees and said, okay, you drop this in here, drop it in the tube, you know, and, but from all the blood, it didn't go well for them either. We found back outside the camp, we found just blood trails. So anyway, the next day we're going around cleaning up all the damage in the camp. Cause I mean, they were right dead on with their mortar rounds, which tells you it's an inside job. So we were out there and I was walking past our water tower and generator, and one of the new Montagnards that we had just hired, he's pacing off from the generator to wherever he was pacing, but I could see that he was pacing. So I snatched him and got our people out there, and in his shirt pocket, he had all the paces from the water tower and generator to the dispensary to the Americans' living quarters to the front gate, and he had all this stuff paced out. So I don't really remember what happened with him. I know he went for a ride, but I don't remember if we sent him down to the main FOB to be interrogated, or I don't know. I don't, it's been 50 years ago. But anyway, so much for a spy, but that was very common back then. You never knew who was a spy. So we get to almost the end of March 25th to be exact, and we're going on another mission with the company. And we were to go deal with a truck park that had been found by a recon team. So we go in the first day and we get in, and it was afternoon. So we spend the night on this hill, which at the bottom of the hill was the road, and apparently the truck park was supposed to be right down there. So during the night, you don't sleep good on these things anyway, but I had a dream. I had a dream that the next day I got shot in the left leg. Next morning, we go down off the hill, and as soon as we hit the bottom of the hill, all hell broke loose. So I was over towards the left side of where the shooting was coming on. So I thought, well, I'll take my squad and we'll make a wheeling motion and kind of go around in a wheeling motion and maybe come in behind the bad guys or something. So just then, one of the bad guys pops up in front of me, and I rolled and came up on one knee, and he and I both shot at the same second. And the same second we shot, one of our guys had fired a law rocket at this bunker. Well, something hit my ankle, and I'm thinking, well, I got hit with a piece of shrapnel. The problem is the bunker and all that was over to my right, and it was my left ankle that got hit. And, okay, fine, I get hit. And the guy looks at his rifle because he tried to fire again. My rifle jammed, and later they found that the ammunition we were using, they were using the wrong kind of powder at Colt. So you fire a round, it didn't extract the round, and it tried to feed another round in. So my rifle's jammed, so it's no good. And this guy looks at his rifle, and he throws it on the ground and starts to take off into the woods. So I threw a grenade. Well, the grenade hits the bamboo up there and bounces back and goes off over us. So we got showered with shrapnel. Nobody got hurt. And then I grabbed my knife, because at that particular time, I didn't carry a backup gun. I learned my lesson then. But I started to go after him with the knife, and when I started to step down with my left foot, my leg buckled and I went down. Well, he went in a bunker, and one of the other guys took care of him. Um, I've got pictures of him and I've got pictures of me holding the rifle. And the reason his second round didn't go off was I was a better shot than I thought. My one round that went off hit the bolt of his SKS, and so his rifle was not functional either. So that's why he threw it down and took off. So anyway, um, I take my boot off and I see this gory blood gushing wound. And I put my boot back in. I call the medic. He bandages me up. And in between time, one of our lieutenants had been killed. So they called for the medic. It took a while to get one in there. And in the meantime, I shot up with my little morphine syringe. So I was feeling no pain. So I hobbled around. I took a bunch of pictures. And they picked us up. It was probably close to noon when they picked us up, took us back to Dak To at our launch site. And then they said, well, you're not dying or anything. So just hang around here and go back with us tonight. So at 5:00, when they shut down for the day, we flew back to the FOB. I tried to talk the head medic, Lou Maggio. I tried to talk him into going ahead and taking the bullet out. You could see the shape of the bullet on my ankle bone. It had gone in the front, gone around to the ankle bone, and turned around, and the bullet was facing back out. Lou's like, no, we're not taking a bullet out here. It's like, come on. He says, no, you're going to get a free trip to Japan. I said, I'm supposed to go to Japan next week on R&R. He said, well, you're going to get to go on us. So they send me the next morning. They send a chopper for me. All night I packed a bag, took all kinds of stuff with me. And a couple days later, well, that night, the platoon got hit really hard. And one of our guys, John Holan, who fired the Law rocket, he got a sucking chest wound. So when they pulled him out, they sent him down to the same hospital I was at the 71st Evacuation Hospital at Pleiku. And he came to see me. And here I am with just a bullet in my ankle, and John's got a sucking chest wound. And I guess they got him bandaged up, and he came to see how I was doing, which I thought was a real class act. So then they said, somebody screwed up and you didn't get put on the manifest for Japan, so you'll be here for another day or two. They said, would you like to call home? Sure. So they did this thing. There's a name for it. They use ham radio operators. So the military system hooks you up with a ham radio operator who contacts whatever phone number you give them. So I gave them my mom's phone number, and they hook us up. And my mom says, where are you? And I said, I'm in the hospital. And the guy cuts in and says, you're not allowed to discuss that. And she says, you got shot in the left leg, didn't you? And I'm like, before the guy could stop me, I said, yeah. She said, I had a dream the other night. Same night that I had the dream that I got shot. What are the odds? So fast forward, they put me on a plane and send me to Japan. Now, one of my best friends from high school was stationed in Tokyo, and I was supposed to go on R&R to take Tokyo, and here I am in a hospital. Well, I didn't have any way to contact him to let him know that I wouldn't be there. And so the day after I got there, they sewed me up because they take the bullet out. And I got an even funnier story. I guess I'll go backwards. This is what happens when you're trying to cram a lot into a small time frame. When they took me to
Uh-oh. Did we lose Terry? Terry? Hang on, guys. He only had about 10 minutes left because he had an hour time limit for part one. Oh, there he is.
So you don't need to know. The toe tag says classified, and that's all you need to know. So they take me into surgery, and they ask, "Are you allergic to any drugs?" And I said, "Pentothal." Well, how do you know you're allergic to pentothal? And I said, "Give it to me, and you'll find out." Because I'm a smart ass. And all I remember is waking up, and I'm strapped on a gurney, and this same doctor's leaning over me again, saying, "Were you in Laos when you got shot?" And all I know is I got my left hand out of the straps. I took out 3 of his teeth, knocked him out cold, and tipped the gurney over. And it's like, what'd you use for any anesthetic? Well, we used pentothal. And I said, didn't I tell you I was allergic to it? Okay, not my problem. So anyway, the second day I'm in the hospital in Japan, 5:30 rolls around, and I hear this voice, "Are you ready?" And I recognize the voice. It's my best friend from back home. And I said, "What do you mean, am I ready?" And he said, "Come on, my car's outside and my girlfriend's waiting." I said, "How did you know that I was here?" He said, "Wait till we get outside and I'll tell you." So I get dressed. The nurse is like, "You're really not supposed to be doing this." And I'm like, the favorite expression back then when you did something you're not supposed to do is, "What are you going to do? Send me back to Vietnam?" So I got dressed and I left. And he had a car and he had a girlfriend, and girlfriend had girlfriends. And for the next 3.5 weeks, every night, 5:30, I'm gone. Don't be looking for me in the hospital. So we had a great time. So then at one point, it's time to get out of the hospital. So they said, well, you got a choice. And for special forces, you only got 2 choices, Vietnam or Korea. And I said, it's too damn cold in Korea. I want to go back to Nam. Well, what they didn't tell me was if you've signed the form saying you want to go back to Vietnam, you have to go see a doctor. Well, what kind of doctor? Well, he's a psychiatrist. So I go see the shrink. I have the form out in my files out in my workshop. He's like, well, why do you want to go back to Vietnam? And I said, let's see. I volunteered for Vietnam. I've only been there 6 months. It's a 13-month tour, and it's cold in Korea. And he signed off on it. I go back to Vietnam. And when I get back there, you go to this replacement depot or whatever, where they assign people out to all these different units. And the hospital kind of screwed up because they didn't cut the orders assigning me back to 5th group. So I get to this replacement depot and they were going to send me to some leg unit. And it's like, that ain't happening. So SOG had its own private fleet of C-130s that were flown by Filipino contractors. So I took off we were in Saigon at Tan Son Nhut. I took off, went to the airport, found the C-130 Blackbird. They were painted black and green with no markings. And every day they made what they called a milk run to all the special forces like BAMI to it, CCS, CCC, CCN, and wherever else. And I got on the plane and flew to Nha Trang to 5th Group headquarters. And I went to the Sergeant Major of 5th Group and I told him what I did. And he says, oh, God, not another one. He said, every time our guys go through there, they try to reassign them to some other unit outside of Special Forces. So, okay, whatever. He said, I'll take care of it. So then they cut orders and sent me back to CCC. And when I got there, first thing I did was get in my locker because I put that SKS in there. I could have brought it home because it was semi-automatic. All I had to do was fill out a form, and it was what you'd call demilitarized because my bullet damaged
You're cutting out on
floor tiles. Okay. Yeah.
There you go.
Picture went away and came right back. So the rifle's gone. Sergeant Major stole my rifle and traded it for floor tiles.
Oh my God.
That's the end of April. In May,
I was gonna see with your timeline. I didn't want to. Okay, good.
I'll tell one more story. I got about 10 minutes, and then I know Jason Holmes has a question. And
yes, sir. That's fine. You just go ahead until you get.
Yeah. So in May, we went into Cambodia. The only time that I ever, because normally CCS took care of Cambodia. So I went into Cambodia. Well, May is the rainy season. So we end up on this hilltop, dug in, and it rained solid for 5 days. And we're all standing in water up over our ankles. And you can hear the trucks pulling up down on the bottom of the hill on the road. We worked an airstrike and blew up a bulldozer that was fixing the road. 10 minutes later, another bulldozer comes in and pushes that dozer off the road and finishes fixing the road. So we know we're in deep stuff. So one of those days, all hell's breaking loose because they got us surrounded, you know. The clouds were down. We're up in the clouds. And so we're standing in our foxhole shooting, and my glasses fell off. Okay, fine. So once the shooting's all over with, I go to wipe my forehead because I figure I'm sweating like crazy or it's rain, you know. And I wipe my forehead right by my corner of my right eye, and it wasn't sweat. It was blood. So I took another bullet right here. And what happened, the bullet took the corner of the glasses out. That's why they fell off. Gave me a nice little crease, and I picked the glasses up, and of course they were destroyed. So that was bullet number 2. And eventually they got us out. I know I spent a week in bed with my legs up with this cream on. We all had what they called immersion foot from being in water for a prolonged amount of time. There was a recon team that was very close to us, and we weren't able to hook up with them, but I heard that one of the guys on the recon team ended up losing his feet because of that immersion foot. Again, I don't know who it was or anything. Okay, Jason Holmes had a comment. I'm not sure what picture he's talking about.
Yeah, Jason.
Is he able to
Mr. Yeah, he is. We've got a few more that I can post up too, but I don't know what RPG picture of you that he's talking about, unless maybe it was a Leghorn or a photo at base. But I'll look. I've got most of your photos.
Any RPG that we had would have been captured. We did not carry them with us on missions. They were too big and bulky moving through the jungle. So it was apparently just a photo op showing an RPG.
Yes, sir. He just sent me the picture.
You know, those things were about 5.
It was the one of you shirtless holding the RPG. It's most definitely a capture y'all brought back to base.
Yeah, that would have just been a captured RPG.
Okay, and we've got
we got questions. Infidel Fireman. Is it known what happened to the brew in the yards that fought on our side after the war was over? Unfortunately, yes, we do know. There's actually 2 large communities of yards. One is in the mountains of North Carolina, and I understand there's another group in California. But essentially, and this is another one of those political shame on us, we essentially just went off and left them. And a lot of them were killed by the Vietnamese who hated them. and then
Re-education camps.
A lot of them were able to. Yeah, they sent them to these re-education camps. And then as years went on, a lot of them were able to escape. But unfortunately, I think we did them dirty in the end. Jason Holmes, was there any test attacks? I'm assuming he's talking about the attack on the yard camp. No, there were no test attacks. It was a surprise attack. They just hit us and hit us hard. And the attack, FOB4 was the same way. It was a total surprise. The sappers came in off the beach and did their thing. Let's see. June, July, and August, I don't remember. We got this big delay, Bud, between when I talk and you answer, so we're talking over each other. So I don't know what to do. I don't think we can do anything.
You keep going ahead. You keep.
June, July, and August. I know we did missions, but I don't really remember anything. September, I don't remember the mission, but I got shot the third time in the side. Took a chunk of meat out of my side. And our medics were so good, I just had him stitch me up out in the field. And I didn't even put in for a Purple Heart because, it's just a chunk of meat out of my side. But it is what it is. September. I think what we should do is quit now. And then that's a robocall. And then we'll do part 2 another day.
Yes, sir. That'll be perfect. Like I said, we've had you for an hour. And
unless there's another question from somebody real quick.
No, sir. Right now it looks like. Yes, sir. Everyone's thanking us, and I agree. We've had you long enough, and we can definitely get a part 2 because you've still got some pretty hairy stuff that you've got to talk about.
Okay. I assume we're signing off then.
Yeah, we're gonna sign off for the day, gentlemen. And everybody says thank you to Mr. Terry. We can't wait for part 2. Same for us here, guys. I'll keep in touch with Mr. Terry and keep you all updated on when we're going to get part 2 out. But thank y'all for joining us. And Mr. Terry, I'll message you here in just a minute. You can just go ahead and leave the studio, and I'm about to leave the studio as well. We're wrapping it up.
Okay, thank you all for joining us.
All right, guys. We'll see y'all later.